Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Igho and this is DIYs with Igho. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how I made this really nice red sequin wrap dress. It's quite simple, it's quite straightforward. You're going to need two main things. You're going to need a bodice pattern and sleeve pattern, right? And I've done tutorials on those already, so I'm going to leave a link to those in the description box. You get all that information as we get into the tutorial, but I want to make this intro as quick as possible. I just wanted to remind you that if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and join the family. And also Happy New Year. I think this is my first DIY in 2020, so I'm very excited to post this. I really love how this dress turned out, and I hope you will too. And that's it. Let's get straight into this tutorial and let's find out what exactly we're going to need to make this dress. Alright guys, so for making this sequin wrap dress, you're going to need your fabric, of course, your sequin fabric that you're going to need to make the dress. You're going to need lining material because sequin usually is a little see-through and it's also very rough, so you don't want that to come into direct contact with your skin. So you're going to have to buy a matching lining fabric to go with your sequin fabric. You're also going to need a bodice pattern and sleeve pattern. Now these are the ones that I've done tutorials on this channel. I'm going to put a link to the tutorials in the description box. We're going to be making our wrap dress pattern using the bodice pattern and the sleeve pattern. You're also going to need basic sewing supplies like a fabric marker of any kind. You're going to need some paper scissors. You're going to need fabric scissors. You're going to also need matching thread and measuring tape or a ruler, or whichever one you have. So these are the materials that you're going to need, and that's it. That's basically all you're going to need. The next thing now is to cut out our wrap dress pattern. For the wrap dress pattern, for the back pattern and the front pattern, I'm going to be drawing our new wrap dress pattern using this white pattern paper, using our bodice pattern as a template to transfer onto the new wrap paper. So the first thing you want to do is note how long you want your dress to be. Now I want mine to be about 41 inches. So I'm just going to measure out a length of 41 inches for my dress. So now the back pattern of the wrap dress is going to be cut on fold. It's going to be cut on fold, and we're really not going to be doing anything special to this part because the wrap is actually in front. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this part out first and try to be as precise as possible. So I'm going to trace this pattern all the way to the hip line. So I want my dress to flare out just a little bit at the bottom. But after doing this, note that this is your hip line. So mark your hip line, which is where I stopped. Mark your waistline. After tracing this out, you can lift your pattern off. Now I'm going to figure out how long I want my dress to be. So measure out how long you want your dress to be using your body, of course. Measure out how long you want your dress to be and then make your pattern that long. Now I want mine to be about 41 inches. So I'm going to measure from the top here. I'm going to measure 41 inches down. This right here is 41 inches. So using your pattern master, just draw out your hemline. So now we have our waistline, if you remember, and our hip line. So from the hip line, I'm just going to draw a slight A-line shape, not too sharp, just a slight A-line shape to the hemline. All right. Okay, so now this is going to be our back pattern. which I'm going to go ahead and cut out now. While you're cutting, you can choose to add your allowance to it, or you can just cut and then transfer your allowance when you're transferring the pattern to fabric. Just make sure you take note of that. Okay, now that we've cut out our back pattern, it's time to work on the front pattern. So just like you did for the back panel, you're going to take your front panel, and for the front pattern is going to be a little different because if you remember, this is where the wrap is going to be, right? So using the back panel for the wrap dress, I'm going to place that on it to determine the length that I want, because we've already measured out the length for the back panel. So just use that as a template. So just use the back panel as a template for the length of the front panel so that the length will be equal. So just mark, this is why it was very important that you mark the hip line and the waistline, because we're going to use those as marking points to draw on the length of our front panel. All right, so take your marker and take your ruler or pattern master and just mark hip and waist. Right, because we want both parts to be as identical as possible, because the side of the dress is basically the same measurement. So to make sure that the length is the same, we're going to be using the back to trace out the length. It's better to use a pattern master as opposed to a ruler, because the pattern master has a right angle that will make sure that you're drawing a straight line, or what you're drawing here is correct and straight enough. So now that we've marked our waistline and our hip line, you can just go ahead and join those points together. So now what we've done is made sure that our front panel is going to be the same length as the back panel. I'm going to take the front panel and match hip and waist to hip and waist. So just go ahead and trace out the rest of your pattern and then work on the wrap on this side. So I'm just going to trace around the armhole, the shoulder line, and then I'm going to extend the waistline by 6 inches. Right. So you can take this part and extend it to the bottom. And then from the neck point, just going to connect from the neckline straight to this point. But now the thing is, I want it to be a little curved along this line. So I'm just going to create a slight curve using my hands because I don't want it to be straight. So you can leave it as it is, or you can create the curve using your free hand. I'm only using my free hand because I don't have the appropriate curve to do that myself. So guys, this is the front pattern. We're going to be cutting 2 pieces of this in as mirror images. So just make sure that when you place this pattern on your fabric that you cut with the fabrics, you cut the 2 pieces either right side facing each other or left side or wrong side facing each other. You want to make sure that you're cutting mirror images of the same piece because they're going to both be in front and overlapping. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we have our front pattern, we can go ahead and cut it out. Now you can go ahead and place your patterns on the fabric and cut. And make sure to cut a healthy allowance around the fabric since the pattern that we cut, since the pattern that we're using wasn't made with allowance. So make sure you leave an allowance while you're transferring your pattern to fabric. So this is what I mean by cutting the fabric right sides facing each other, so that when you're done, you're going to have mirror images, not the same piece. So these are the front pieces, and they are mirror images of each other because they're going to overlap. So repeat the cutting process for the lining fabric as well. The same bodice pieces that you cut for your main fabric, cut the same pieces out for your lining fabric as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the sleeves. I want the sleeves to have a little bit of a butterfly effect. So even though I'm going to use the regular sleeve pattern, I'm going to be spreading it out at the seams a little bit, just so I can get the butterfly effect that I want. So I'm going to be spreading it out by about 3 to 5 inches at the bottom of the hem of the sleeves, just so I can get the butterfly effect that I want, because I don't want the sleeves to be too fitted. And then after cutting out one pair of sleeves, place that piece on top of another piece and just cut out a mirror image of that, and that would give you a second sleeve. Remember, we're only cutting sleeves for the sequin fabric. We're not going to cut sleeves for the lining fabric. We're only lining the inside of the dress, not the sleeves of the dress. So if you've cut all the parts that you need, the back part and the front part, you can go ahead and do the exact same thing to the lining fabric. Just cut out 2 front parts and 2 back parts. And now it's time to put our parts together. So take the actual fabric and we're going to line them up at the seam. We're going to pin them and sew. Line up your fabrics, right sides facing each other. Do the same thing to your lining as you're doing to your main fabric. So line up all the parts. We're going to pin them and we're going to sew them at the shoulder parts and at the sides all the way down, from the armpits all the way down. We're going to be joining them. So do this for both the main fabric and the lining fabric. So go ahead and just pin all the way to the bottom. Take the other front piece, place it right side facing each other, and do the same thing. Pin at the shoulder and pin at the sides and sew. And like I said, repeat the exact same steps for the lining fabric. So the lining is going to be exactly the same as the main fabric, because we're going to be joining both pieces together. All right, so that's what we're doing. We're sewing this way, we're sewing this way, and then we're joining, and then we're joining this way as well. So shoulders and sides. Sew the sides of the sleeves together, and if you notice, if you look, you see that I put pins on the back part of the sleeve. That's just so that when I'm about to join it, I will know which part is the back of the sleeve and which part is the front of the sleeve. So for this tutorial, you're also going to need a tie. So just go ahead, take some of your satin fabric and just make a tie. All right, so right now we should have our lining fabric. We also have our sequin fabric, our main fabric. Now it's time for us to put the two together. That's the next step. We're going to join them at the neck and at the edges, at the wrap edges. So we're going to take them right sides facing each other. Right sides facing each other, that's where you're going to join. So lay your sequin fabric right side up and just put your lining right side facing right side. So we're going to be joining them at the neck. So we're just going to be joining them together. So go ahead and pin first before you do anything. Don't just go ahead and sew. I mean, if you're an expert and you really trust yourself, then you can go ahead and sew, but I would suggest pinning before you sew, just to be sure that you have all your parts in the right proportion, because you want both the lining and the fabric to be the same measurement. You want them to fit. You don't want one side to be lopsided. So to make your job easier and neater, line them up together at the neck. So you've pinned the neck. We're also going to go down where the wrap is, right sides facing each other. We're going to pin the wrap part all the way to the bottom of the dress. Cut the lining piece just a little bit shorter than the actual fabric. That was intentional because I want the bottom of the fabric to have a little bit of a silhouette. You don't want them to be the same length. You can make them almost the same length if you want, but I wanted mine to be just a little shorter. Do the same thing to the other wrap part. Just pin right sides facing each other. So when you're done, this is what you should have. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and sew all the parts that I've pinned together. So now we're done sewing around. The next step is to flip everything right side out. And then I'm going to go in and sew the seams on the inside closed to make the work extra neat. So now I flipped the outfit right side on the right side. So this is what it looks like on the inside. See, it's clean and it's neat. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've hemmed the bottom of the lining fabric. This, because of how I cut the lace fabric, I cut it so that the bottom of the lace fabric is the actual bottom of the fabric. So this part is just going to be as it is. I'm not going to be hemming that part. So just flip right side out, arrange it properly, and see what your dress looks like. So now that we have all the parts put together, all the hemmables hemmed and everything, it's the next step, and the very last step is attaching the sleeves. So now we're just going to go ahead, lay our sleeves in the right place and attach. So what you're going to do is take your sleeve and hold it, pin it to your fabric, right sides facing each other. So it's all pinned. Just go ahead and sew the sleeve around and do the same for the other sleeve, and that's it. We're done with this dress and it's time to see what the final product looks like. I'm really excited about this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in my next video.